It's a ToddCast Time Machine.
Let's go into the ToddCast Time Machine. Sorry, I always want to say there's some sort of blue. It's sort of an old Scooby-Doo thing in my head, right? You know, where there was, anyway. But here's the subject matter. If you want to understand why U.S. relationships across the Western Hemisphere remained so uneasy, you have to go back to 1903. That's right. We are going back to 1903 because it was this week in 1903 that the United States of America helped create a country called Panama. So, in fact, the title of this ToddCast Time Machine segment, there's only one title you can come up with if you know me at all. And I'll do a little shout out there to D. Jones. A Man, a Plan, Panama. It's everyone's favorite palindrome. And in some ways, it's America's favorite myth, right? It's the story of bold leadership, big machinery, and destiny carved through jungle and rock. But underneath this heroic narrative is something darker. It's the birth of a pattern that has defined U.S. relations with Latin America for more than a century. It's the moment when America learned how to build nations the way we build infrastructure. Engineered to serve our needs first and theirs later. And if you look at our posture towards Venezuela at the moment, the mix of moral intent and strategic control, it's hard not to feel like we have seen this movie before. But let's go back. Let's go through the ToddCast history lesson of the day. At the dawn of the 20th century, the United States, of course, was emerging from being a new nation to an empire. The Spanish-American War had turned us into a global superpower, and global powers always are looking to expand their power, to flex their muscle, if you will, to potential routes. And at the time, we really, really wanted to dominate shipping, and we needed a route through essentially from the Atlantic to the Pacific. There were two potential routes to create a canal. There was the Nicaragua and Panama. The French, under Ferdinand de Lesseps, he's the guy that did the Suez Canal, he tried Panama first. And he failed spectacularly. There was disease, corruption, bankruptcy, killed 20,000 workers. The dream itself seemed dead. But the French company that he had that did this still held the rights to this little strip of land in Panama, rights that a smooth-talking engineer named Philippe Bunau Varilla was determined to sell. So he lobbied Washington relentlessly and found a willing buyer in President Theodore Roosevelt. Let's just say, you know, we love Teddy, but he was one enthusiastic imperialist. In 1903, the Roosevelt administration cut a deal with Colombia, which then governed the territory now known as Panama. That deal, which was known as the Hay-Huron Treaty, was named after the two negotiators of the said treaty, the Secretary of State at the time, John Hay, and Colombia's envoy, Tomas Huron. And the deal was this. The U.S. offered Colombia $10 million up front. It's a lot of money at that time, right? And an additional $250,000 a year for a very narrow strip of land to build the canal. But the Colombian Senate refused to ratify this treaty. They wanted a better price, and they wanted more control of the land. Well, Roosevelt didn't like it. He didn't like that answer. He called the Colombians foolish and homicidal, and he muttered that he was being dealt with by bandits. So then Bunau Varilla, the French engineer salesman, whispered a different idea. Hey, Mr. President, what if Panama just stopped being part of Colombia? So on November 3rd, 1903, okay, see where we're going here? It's this week, November 3rd. Today, actually, as this podcast is first airing, the anniversary of, a small group of Panamanian separatists declared independence. Within hours, U.S. warships appeared in the harbor, coincidentally blocking Colombian troops from landing. And by November 6th, the United States recognized the new Republic of Panama. And less than 2 weeks later, Roosevelt got the treaty he wanted all along. But this time, the treaty was called the Hay-Bunau-Varilla Treaty, signed by, you guessed it, Bunau Varilla himself, a Frenchman acting as Panama's representative. Remember, he was just the businessman that seemed to own the rights to build this canal. And he signs the treaty on behalf of this new nation. The treaty gave the U.S. sovereign control over a 10-mile wide canal zone in perpetuity. which, of course, eventually during the Jimmy Carter presidency, we would hand back. And Roosevelt couldn't help but brag about it, right? He said, I took the isthmus. It was at once a great feat of engineering in human history, probably the greatest, and one of the clearest examples of America using its muscle to redraw someone else's map. The Panama Canal opened in 1914. The world applauded. Latin America took notes. Now, this is a little interlude I thought I would include. Is this where, because I'll be honest, I was conflating the following. Is this where the term Banana Republic came from? Sort of, but not quite. Certainly the era. So, quick history lesson. The term Banana Republic actually comes from Honduras, not Panama. It was coined by American writer O. Henry in 1904, and it was in a short story collection called Cabbages and Kings. He had fled to Honduras to avoid an embezzlement charge himself, and he used the phrase to describe a fictional country, Anchuria, that was small, unstable, and entirely dependent on American fruit companies. Well, the United Fruit Company, the banana company, if you will, a real U.S. corporation, basically ran parts of Central America back then, the so-called banana republics. That's how this all came from. This United Fruit Company built railroads, built ports, even influenced coups. The governments were nominally independent, but the real power lay with the investors themselves. So Panama didn't coin the term, but in many ways it embodied the idea, because what happened in Panama, local elites seeking power, foreign capital providing muscle, and Washington enforcing the deal, was the same exact three-step model that would define all of our interventions for the next century in Latin America. Panama was the first republic built to order, not for its citizens, but for American commerce. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, geez, now I know why half of Latin America never trusts the United States. Yeah, you do, don't you? So from that point on, the region's politics became a pendulum swing between dependence and defiance. You'd have one generation strongman was the next generation's nationalist. You can trace this oscillation back and forth, pro-U.S., anti-U.S., pro-U.S., anti-U.S. We see it right now in Colombia. Right now, we have a president who won by being a bit more distant from the U.S. The previous president won because he was pro-U.S. And it goes back and forth. We saw it in Cuba in the 20th century, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil. Each cycle shaped by how America's good intentions collided with its control instincts. It's the defining political rhythm of this hemisphere. You know, are we the bad guys? Are we the good guys? Do we care about the people, or do we just care about the resources, right? If you trust Washington, your country may prosper a little bit. If you resent Washington, you revolt, but you may suffer economically. So the canal itself, in many ways, right, was both the symbol and the seed of this pattern. So let's fast forward, 2025. Same story, sort of, right, playing out right now with different props. Venezuela, once one of the richest democracies in Latin America, spent 2 decades spiraling under authoritarian rule. Corruption, economic collapse, millions have fled. It's part of the largest diaspora outside of any, right? There are more Venezuelan refugees lately than any other country creating refugees. People are just fleeing this country. And yes, the desire to help restore democracy is a real, legitimate, and even moral goal. But how we pursue this goal is going to be a real test. We've used sanctions, covert aid, diplomatic pressure, even lethal strikes off the Venezuelan coast. Justified, we're calling it this anti-narcotics missions, when it's increasingly clear we simply are trying to remove Maduro. The voters tried to remove him and they couldn't do it, but we're not making this the reason why we're doing it, right? We're Trump. He's creating. We have a drug problem in this country. We have a fentanyl problem in this country, but it's not from Venezuela. So he's using a real problem that we have that's a derivative of Mexico and China, and instead using that as the pretext to go after Venezuela, because maybe he thinks politically he could never just sell democracy as the reason to go help and get rid of Maduro. So we do say it at times, right? Our motives are democracy, human rights, stability. It all sounds noble, but our methods, unilateral enforcement, economic coercion, it reminds the region of every time we've claimed to build something for them, that it mostly was about serving us, right? And how does Venezuela end, right? Does it end with us just simply wanting more access to the oil? Look at how we go back and forth. We just want that oil, more access to their resources. Are we in it for the long haul to just actually provide independent democracy? Not democracy dependent on the United States, but true independence, true independent democracy. But right now, I do fear how we're going about this is only reigniting the same cycle of resentment that develops, right? And it forms these nationalist movements that push out people that are pro-democracy. So we're here, the same 100-year oscillation is back. Leaders run as reformers. They become populist. They start pro-U.S. They end as skeptics. Every demagogue, every strongman from Havana to Caracas, they've all learned to weaponize this history to tell their citizens, you may not like me, but at least I'm not them. I'm standing in between them truly taking over this country, right? At least I'm one of you. And that's something that I think we've got to be careful of as we essentially try to play beat cop here. And how we're doing it, if we're essentially lying about why we're there, which right now we are with this drug pretext, it is not going to allow for this to be as stable as I think we think it is. So maybe here's the palindrome's other meaning: a man, a plan, Panama. One man's plan, Teddy Roosevelt's, built a canal and built a century of contradictions. It opened the world to trade, and it opened a wound in the hemisphere that still hasn't fully healed. So if we want a different legacy in Venezuela or anywhere else south of the Rio Grande, we have to show that our plans serve the region's needs, not just our needs. Because until we do, Latin America will keep reading our policies backward, and they will still see a man, a plan, Panama. There's your history lesson for today, and how the past is so connected to the present. There's a reason results matter more than promises. Just like there's a reason Morgan & Morgan has become America's largest injury law firm. For the last 35 years, they've recovered $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. It includes cases where insurance companies offered next to nothing, sort of shortchanging, seeing if they could get away with it. And Morgan & Morgan fought back, and they won millions. In Pennsylvania, one client was awarded $26 million. It was a staggering 40 times the amount that the insurance company originally offered. That offer, $650,000, whatever it took to sort of get away without paying. So with more than 1,000 lawyers across the country, Morgan & Morgan knows how to deliver for everyday people. So if you're injured, you're looking for a lawyer, check out forthepeople.com/Toddcast or dial pound law, pound 529 on your cell phone. And remember, all law firms are not the same. So give Morgan & Morgan a look. Their fee is free unless they win.